Hi, I'm Andrew Stanton. I'm a Pixar filmmaker from the old guard of the studio. I'm one of the OG, and I was in the room where it happened when we had to initially figure out what kind of company Pixar wanted to be, a computer graphics company or an animation studio about 30 years ago. And we, of course, grew into that legitimate film studio, and our next goal was to keep surprising ourselves, to avoid sameness and safety with what we made. And ideally, we wanted the only thing that was predictable about a Pixar film was that it would be worth your time, and that the rest, all bets were off. How we achieve that should be an adventure and explore new territory every time. And so that leads me to the evolution of the SparkShorts program that we created. A while back, we noticed that our feature shorts were becoming a limited means to discover talent and explore new subject matter. There was just too much money and attention and public pressure on being attached to these big feature films. So we created a program that was low cost and out of the spotlight. We made a grant for independent filmmakers within our studio that anyone could apply for. And if an applicant's pitch was approved, we gave them limited funds, barely any oversight, and encouraged them to, by hook or crook, figure out to make a way to make their short film while still keeping their day job. And the SparkShorts program has succeeded well beyond our wildest expectations. And these 5 shorts are a testament to the untapped breadth of diversity, talent, and originality that reside within our own studio walls. So I'm going to introduce you to our 5 directors of these SparkShorts. I'm going to do them in a alphabetical order of the title. So first up is director Maddie Sharafian, who directed Burrow. Next is director Bobby Rubio, who did Float. Next is director Erica Milsom, who did Loop. And director Steve Hunter, who did Out. And director Edwin Chang, who did Wind. And for some reason, everybody had a single word title as their film. I don't know if that's a rule, but I'm going to ask a couple questions of you individually, and then I'm going to open it up for the whole group. And so again, I'm going to start in alphabetical order. Maddie, your film is Burrow. Could you just give us just a brief description of what it's about and how it got inspired?
Yes. Burrow is about a young rabbit, and she's building her very first burrow, but she has no idea what she's doing. And instead of accepting the help of all of her neighbors who are living like right next door, she gets really shy and she just tries to avoid everyone. She digs herself deeper into isolation. And then in my synopsis, which I wrote, and I was very proud of myself, I wrote that she hits bedrock bottom. And then I won't spoil what happens next. But I sort of base it off of my experience at Pixar. I'm a perfectionist, which a lot of us are, but also Pixar is a really collaborative place. And those two things are like really hard to live next to each other. So I noticed that I would always want to show up to like a pitch, because I'm in the story department, with everything exactly perfect and like golden. But that's not how the story is supposed to work. So that meant that I was just pulling like a lot of late nights and weekends, and I wouldn't show my work to my friends. I just sort of made like a really unhealthy lifestyle for myself. And I too reached bedrock bottom and realized that I needed to change my ways. And I found once I started to like bring my friends in earlier, show things rougher, my like entire life got a lot better. So that's sort of the
That's
story.
So without giving too much away, I mean, it's really focused on community, and as you've described, you had no idea COVID was coming, and
No.
suddenly this film comes out. Has there been a kind of response related to that?
I think there has been. I've had a lot of people ask if I think people assumed it was made during quarantine.
Yeah.
I was like, no, we finished this last December. We had no idea. But I've noticed I've noticed a lot of people really thanking me for even just like the visual of like a burrow over here and a little tunnel and another burrow here is sort of like what we all envision like right now on Zoom, is like we're all in our little bubbles, and then Zoom is like this little tendril of connection coming through.
Right.
Yeah. I also
Yeah.
noticed like just reaching out, calling your friends, this sort of thing. It really, it's like the theme of the short is to reach out and ask for help. And I found myself actually like following my own advice. and it did help.
That's great. That's great. Okay. Bobby, we're going to move on to you for Float. Can you just tell us briefly what roughly the idea is and where it came from?
Okay. So Float is a story about a father and son, and the son is different from the other children and because he floats. And I got the idea for my story because I based it off of my relationship with my son. And my son is on the autism spectrum. And I had a very difficult time with his diagnosis. But through time, I've learned to love him, accept him for who he is, and to just celebrate his difference. So that's what was all in the short. That's what all went into the short.
So it's super personal, and it's sort of a tough, brave thing to reveal about yourself. What's the response been from others about it?
Oh, the response has been absolutely wonderful. I intentionally made floating to be a metaphor for difference. And it's because I wanted the audience to come up with their own interpretation of what difference meant to them. And so from all across the world, I've gotten notes from the autism community, the special needs community, the gay community, and even parents who've just freaked out or lost it with their kids. And I think the reason why the film resonates is because we're all not perfect. And, we could all learn to just love each other and accept one another and accept our differences. And that'll just make us better parents and better people.
It's great. It's great. Okay, Erica Milsom, you've directed Loop. Can you tell us briefly what it's about, where the idea came from?
Sure. Well, I think of Loop as a little road movie about two different kids who are stuck in their favorite place, which is a canoe, but they're unable to move forward until they figure out a way to connect. And they're two very different kids. Loop features a child who's on the autism spectrum, who's neurodiverse, and another kid who's not, and trying to find a way to connect without language. And the idea came for me literally. I was like, I want to pitch a Spark short and I should think of a world we've never been to before. And then you start doing this like exhaustive catalog of like, oh my God, we've been on a wire with the birds. We've been underwater. We've been, there's a lot of places that we've gone, and these worlds are pretty expansive. So I had to really reframe my thinking. I was like, okay, well, think about worlds that you've been in that other people haven't. And I've spent a lot of time in my life in worlds where I didn't speak the language, either because of traveling, but also I've spent a lot of time working in disability communities where communication is really, really different. And right before I came up with this idea, I'd been volunteering with some adults with disabilities who were amazing artists, like super, really, really cool artists, many of whom did not speak, there's a statement, that did not speak using their mouth parts. Like they were people who had a whole different way of communicating. And I was like, wow, I have never seen that world on screen, particularly in animation, but honestly, like almost I've never seen it on screen in a fictional way. And I felt like it would be really exciting to see our artists take it on. And also I felt like it would be a challenge that pushed Pixar. Like I always feel like the shorts programs have been this beautiful way to push our studio to try something new. And a lot of times we think of it as technical or, as a creative force, but sometimes there's just that push that you need to say like, let's try living in another identity that we haven't seen before. And that like, maybe we're a little afraid of and don't quite know how to do. So that was, and also when you're in those spaces, there's a lot of emotions that get evoked. It's awkward, it's funny, it's weird. It's exciting if you do make a connection. And I feel like those feelings to me are like the foundation of good story, is to feel feelings. So that was one of the things I was looking at.
You got a lot of praise for using an actual nonverbal actress. And what was, tell us a little bit more about the decision to do that.
It's funny when I was like, oh, Andrew's going to interview me. This question to me is really funny because you're the guy who taught me about voice talent at Pixar. right? Like
Okay.
it's weird, but I remember interviewing you and being like, what makes a great voice talent? And you're like, it's a voice that cuts through. It's a voice that evokes emotion, and that you hear something and you feel it from just the voice. And to me, as soon as I thought, oh, I'm going to have a nonverbal character who uses I kind of thought I'll give her a device to communicate with. I was like, but she's going to have a voice and it's going to be amazing. Because when you're in these spaces and you listen to folks who vocalize instead of speaking, it's really, really different, and it cuts through, and it makes, again, it just evokes emotion. And so it's really funny, Andrew, I think about you. And so that's one part of it.
Well, the microphone loved her, which is a term I always use. The microphone has to love the voice. So,
exactly. And the second half, just to add, is that there's a philosophy in the disability, I don't know if it's a philosophy and the ethos, that they've said, don't tell stories about us without us. And I knew about that. I'd known about it for a long time. And so like, I just never even considered using like a non-disabled actor to voice this character. I was like, oh, this is a wonderful opportunity for, connection, and for us to learn, and for us to like adapt our processes and think about how does our creative process kind of have elasticity to collect a different or to connect with a different kind of actor. And Madison Bandy, who voiced Renee, we sent out a call to a bunch of nonprofits that work with adults with disabilities in arts or performance. And as soon as we found her, it was like, okay, well, let's get to know her. Let's bring her to Pixar. Will that work? And Pixar, if you're autistic, oftentimes sensory experiences can be really, really intense. And Pixar is a pretty intense experience, no matter what, when you're there new. So we brought her, we had a really great time visiting, and then we were like, we're not going to do it here. So we all went to her house and did it at her house, and with her support network, with her family, who helped prep her to sing the ringtone, to do some of the directed stuff that did require like using words or using song. So it was really fun. She's an amazing actress. I love her. She's super
great.
Fun. Yeah.
Okay, next up is Steve Hunter, who directed Out. Tell us a little bit about yours and where the idea came from.
Sure. I was lucky. I got to work on a couple of the first SparkShorts with on Pearl and Smash and Grab. So I got a sense of what the program was. And then when they asked me to do something, I kept trying to think of what kind of story I wanted to tell. And like I said this at the company meeting when we premiered it, but I was like, I came out to my parents over the phone at Pixar, and I was 27. So that's like half my life I was not sharing who I was with my family. And like I quickly realized that I needed to tell a coming out story, because I was just like, this is something that's been sitting in the back of my head, and it's something I still needed to process. And I think when we don't share who we are, we lose a piece of ourselves. So a lot of it was coming from that really emotional, like, kind of place, and then trying to figure out how to communicate it in a way that not just for a gay audience, but for families of LGBTQ plus kids, and so that they could see themselves, families could see themselves, the struggle with that, and be able to talk about it. So it was weird. We did a talk over in Paris, and somebody brought up like, it's a fairy tale. And my immediate thing was like, no, it's not. And then I realized, oh no, it is. I made a fairy tale, for gay kids, for my little 12-year-old gay closeted self, And so that's what the point of it was, really.
And how has the response been? I mean, it's never an easy thing to discuss and to go forward and do. And so have you gotten a response about it?
Yeah, it's been from the first time it premiered on Disney Plus last year. It was so overwhelming. Like Max and I just were like waves of like, oh my God, it's so great. And what's awesome is you get two camps. You get older gay men in their 50s, 60s, like me, who are like, oh, I wish I'd had that film when I was a kid, man, that would have helped me out. To like kids or parents of kids that are like, we had the most amazing discussion about what love is, because there's a generation out there that look at this and go, what's the big deal? And that's amazing to me.
Wow.
But it doesn't negate the fact that we still got to process what we went through, the fact that when I got married, I had to leave the country because it wasn't allowed here, or the fact that, like, I wrote about this yesterday, but I was like, in Latin America, it premiered on Disney Plus at Christmas, or Disney Plus opened sometime in October or something like that in Latin America. And it wasn't on Disney Plus right away. And people were like, oh my God, this is censorship. And I was like, no, hold on. Like it's gonna roll out, and like, but the fact that everybody immediately, like, we assured them it was like, this is gonna be on, don't worry about it, and it did, and everybody, again, the response was awesome, but it showed like how hungry we are to see these kind of stories, to see ourselves in these stories, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like
great.
all of these shorts are kind of doing.
Great, that's great. Okay, and last, Edwin Chang, who directed Wind. Edwin, can you just tell us a little bit about your film? What gave you the idea?
Yeah. Wind is about a grandmother and boy trapped in an endless chasm. They scavenge the debris around them in order to try and build a way to escape to a better life. It's inspired by my grandmother and her story. In the 1950s, she was a young mother living in the north of Korea. And with the start of the Korean War, she, my father, and his 3 brothers fled south, not realizing that when they left behind my grandfather, it was going to be the last time they would ever be able to see him. And they were separated, like so many families were when the country was split. And so my grandmother was left a single mother, taking care of 4 boys in the aftermath of a devastating war. And Wind is inspired by her and her story and everything she did to take care of her family, feed them, educate them, and eventually when my dad got older, putting together enough to send them all the way to the US for a new life there.
Wow, wow. And that's such a specific, but I would think speaks to a certain culture and a certain experience for a lot of people. I mean, have you gotten responses about that?
Yeah, it's been really heartwarming to see the responses. People just saying how much it reminds them of their own parents and grandparents' sacrifices. And just really seeing how that love, that familiar love, is just shared across so many cultures, and so many people can relate to that, and just the stories throughout history that are repeating themselves like that.
I think that's the thing that's impressed me the most about all the films, is that I don't have to have experienced them to, or even know about some of the information and the history to find empathy and connection with what you're coming across, which is, I guess, the real job of a great storytelling, is that you can inform and educate and involve us, even if we have no prior experience or perspective about something. And so that's what blows me away about all of your films. So I'm going to open up to the rest of you, and so it's going to get a little bit messy, but you also had the ability to just present it both visually and structurally, or just everything about it was free reign for you guys to just pick your aesthetics, pick the way you wanted to look. So why did you pick the looks that you did, and the style of storytelling that you did? Somebody throw in a thought.
I can
Go ahead.
Go for it.
Yeah, in the beginning, I didn't know a lot about animation from the inside out. I'd looked at it from the outside in. So in the beginning, I thought, oh my God, I can't do Pixar house style because it'd be just like too expensive, and we should. So I was talking to David Lally about this for a while and experimenting with some different ideas. And then we both just were like, we want these kids to live in the Pixar family. We want people to feel like this is as much of a Pixar film as anything else. And so we really, it turned back to Pixar house style pretty fast. And I feel really like when I hear from the autistic community about it, and actually, and the Black community too, it's like folks are always like, oh my God, I love these characters. I'm so glad they're a part of this family. And it's just so cool to have them be Pixar characters. So I think I'm glad we made that choice, and it's a beautiful, it's such an elegant style, and we finished it.
Yeah, there's that reality. Yeah.
That was my fear.
I have to say, one of the things, I think the style for your film works so well because of the acting that you're having to do. Like, Renee's voice is fantastic, but the work that the animators did in emoting that was some of the most shocking stuff I've seen in animation, in my 30-year career. I'm just the way they did the hand gestures and expressions on her face. I think you needed that more Pixar style to it wouldn't look. I don't know if I could communicate it as well if it looked like my film.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and oh my God, the animators just kicked this out of the park, and I just honor them so much for the work they did with this. None of them knew anyone who was autistic. That's the crazy thing. They gathered this sort of insight and thought so hard about it and really committed to being there with it, and saying okay, I'm going to do these scary things. And yeah, thank you, Steve. That is completely true. Stephen.
Well, we also did use the Pixar house style as well, because it was because of budget. and schedule.
It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, because it was like, well, I would rather put my emphasis and development on the story and the animation side. And so it was like, okay, well, let's use what we can from Pixar. And what I loved about the beauty of the Pixar house style is that it's animated, yet it has a realistic quality to it. So it feels kind of grounded.
And we always call it believable.
Yeah, believable. So like when you have a floating kid in this kind of realistic, grounded world, it makes it more magical. You're like, oh, what? And the great thing about being able to use Pixar backlot is Buzz and Woody are in my short. There's an Easter egg. They're in the park.
Nice. You're reminding me of that film quote, like Scorsese asked Kurosawa once why he did a shot a certain way in Rashomon, because he loved this shot, the way it framed it. And Kurosawa said, well, there's a hospital over here and a highway over here. So all I can do is put right here. And I just love the truth of that. Like limitations, that's a perfect, like saying you had to go house style just to get it done is not it's not a negative, it's like working with the limitations. But, I mean, Maddie, you and Steve both have very different looks. So what chose those?
Mine was also it was like limitation, but in like almost like a weird opposite version of it, where the story that I wanted to tell had so many sets and backgrounds that to build and model all of those in like the 6 months that we have to make a short would be impossible. Like I set off with the desire to make a short that was all like cutaways, kind of like Wes Anderson or like children's book, like those illustrations that you just want to look at for like hours when you're a kid, like what's in there? And it was, for me, 2D was like, that's literally the only way that this is going to be possible. So, I mean, I also love 2D, so that works out too, but it was kind of my only avenue to make a short like that with this time frame and budget.
There's a cozy quality though to that Richard Scarry kind of world.
Yeah, Richard Scarry.
It's very warm, right? It's like I almost feel like it's like the soil itself. It's a very warm approach that I thought that look had. So
we did that on we did that on purpose. And there's like some small things, like even the line that outlines all the characters isn't black. It's like a brown. So even that, those small little tweaks. We wanted it to be something where you would watch the short and pick out like your favorite Burrow, and then you can just fantasize about living there instead of this cold, hard world.
So, Steve, your look is the most unseen I've ever thought I'd see out of Pixar. So I want to know how that came about.
Well, okay, so let's see. Okay, the official reason is it's just, I wanted to make a story for my kid self. So I wanted that sort of like Little Golden Books, Mary Blair kind of quality.
It reminds me of The Snowy Day. Remember that book, The Snowy Day?
Yeah, yes,
yeah.
And it's so good, right? So trying to capture that kind of feeling, but so then the other thing is I had a 10-minute short that was really long, and people were like, "You can't have it be that long. There's no way we can animate it." And so I was like, "Okay, well, yeah, you're right. If I have to do it photoreal, it's going to mean that I have to animate it to like that level."
Right.
And like and what we were able to do is like get the animators in there and figure out acting beats and really work on it. And some of the polish we just went, oh well, kind of thing, because it works with the style. Like it was like kind of the style kind of thing. And then because I tried to cut stuff out to bring the runtime down. Like I thought, well, maybe you don't need the dad. It's about him and the mom, so maybe you cut the dad out. And then I was like, Ugh. And then if I cut him out, then I lose the hug. And then if I lose the hug, then I got so do I cut the boyfriend? And it became like there's no way I could do it. And so I felt like I needed to like just accept it and embrace it. And so and the other thing we were doing was leveraging the Pixar backlot as well to build these characters, because we could use all the characters. I think they're background characters from Toy Story, and they had the typical Pixar eyes and everything like that. And one day I was just like, I can't stand it. I want to cut those out. I don't want it to reference those. I want just dots. I want to play around with. I loved Tintin growing up, and I wanted that kind of quality to it,
Awesome.
I want to go. Okay, so staying with the theme of like very limited time, very limited budgets and stuff like that. So Let's start with you, Edwin. What was like the biggest hurdle, the biggest challenges that like you just never expected and yet you had to conquer?
Yeah. Well, I think the time constraints we have on this just puts a pressure cooker for the entire production. And it's really just crucible to really get you to refine your idea. And for me, my background is fairly unusual for someone to become a director. I'm from the technical side of things. So going to this is very new for me, but also, just massive imposter syndrome, just trying to figure out how I was doing things on the way. But at the same time, I think because of that kind of pressure, it also makes you really figure out what's important, what you want to put in the story, and just lay your ground posts as to what the story you want to tell is. And I think because of that, I was really able to just be a lot more honest and earnest and figure out exactly what I wanted the final thing to be and just trim everything down and know exactly what it was supposed to be.
I'm completely projecting. I have no knowledge, but I want to assume that because you were small and scrappy, that was a great thing.
I think there's pluses and minuses being small.
No, there's been quiet there. Wow. See, I'm completely wrong. I'm completely wrong.
Yeah, I think, for one thing, I think us pool of directors all going through this, especially Bobby and Erica and I were doing this at the same time. And there was just a real camaraderie in that, just being like, oh man, this week was hard.
Oh, so you guys were, 3 of you were in production at the same time?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
And we'd have little tea times.
I was like,
I love
how
that.
are you doing this week? Oh yeah.
That's so film school though, because that's how I remember film school was like, how are we doing on your shirt? We were all trying to help each other finish. We made this pact, like everybody's got to finish.
Yeah.
Right. And I do remember like when I was with Erica and Edwin, that I remember telling them, I just have to cut 30 seconds of my
I remember that day. Yes.
And that was a difficult day because I was like, Chrissy's my producer saying I got to cut this because we don't have money. We got to put them to the animation. And so, Bobby, you got to cut that kitchen scene. And I'm like, that scene's essential. But the cool thing is, by being like rough and scrappy the way we were, we had to solve a way for that story point within the kitchen that we could put it in another scene. Mm-hmm. And at the time I was, I was so mad and upset, but like you start to come up with other ways and it made me a better director and a better storyteller by being in that position. That was, do you guys mind if I go for
to that?
That was
Bobby,
great.
I remember that happened to you. And then shortly after that, our Adam, at the time, Adam Burke was our Adam lead. Right. And he got ill and he stepped away. But so he and Allie had bid out the show and they were like, well, we're not going to be able to finish this in animation. This was like halfway through the process. And they had come and told me that they didn't think we were going to be able to finish it in animation. And it was like, do you cut it or how do you? And I was like, well, we have to finish it. It's gonna, like, I don't know how we're going to do it. And it was just really, really interesting because you had gone through that and had made the cut, which I think like your film's amazing. Like it is so perfect. Like it doesn't need the kitchen. I felt like I kind of needed all that stuff. So we went through and we did this strategy about like, okay, we're going to approach animation. So we're going to accept blocking as much as possible all the way through and really choose this for, I don't know if animators, this is a professional audience. Like we're going to do a blocking pass and we're going to let that go as much as possible. And then we're only going to polish what must be polished. And like, it was pretty scary.
It's like, we're only going to do this in one take. It's the equivalent of that. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
There was a lot of that going on.
There was, and I think, right? Yeah. And I feel like, sort of if you've done independent films before, one take is a normal, like for me. It's like,
you're always like, if Clint can do it, I can do it,
And I think you let all your animators know that everyone gets on board. And for me, it meant that I had to like direct the hell out of every single shot. Like I wrote like as much information as I could that could help that performance in every single shot. But I feel like you got like having this community of directors to sort of bounce off the scaries because there's so many of them.
I mean, we had like a term. We had a term SparkShort good. Yes,
Spark perfect and Spark good.
Good enough. That's good enough. Move on.
Use that on actual production, like.
But to that point, like it's about taking sort of the pressure off the crew to like go look at
Yeah.
get the idea in, get
Yeah.
what's the point of the shot, get the emotion in there, and move on to the next one because you don't have the time. And so it really is it's a joke, but it's true. You have to do that. You know?
Well,
I mean,
and
it's a weird problem that nobody expects, but like, you know, I always try to tell people we work with Olympic athletes who are always trying to do their personal best. So we actually spend more time trying to calm them down and say it's a good enough, or don't
Let go.
let go. Then we are the other way around. Than pushing, you know.
We're like the horses in the stable going, I can do this. I can win this race. Yeah.
Because there's animators that are like totally like working on just the hands like flowing
Yeah.
down. Like we don't have.
Stop it.
So we're just in the time we have. What if somebody's saying I'm gonna go into the SparkShorts program? I'm gonna apply. I'm gonna do it. What was your takeaway? I mean, it doesn't have to be a positive, but just what's your kind of takeaway from the experience? Each of you jump in when you have something.
I could just say, like, I think it's just what everybody in this group has done, and even the ones before us, you know, Chris and Lester and the gang. It was finding some truth that you needed to tell, you know, finding something inside you, and we all do this. That's one of the things I love about Pixar is that we're all doing that, even at the feature film level, is trying to figure out what's this kernel of truth that we're trying to share with the world. And I think that's what you have to bring to the SparkShort as well.
And what's great about it is once it's out in the world, like I didn't realize this, but it's out there in the whole entire world. Pixar's reach is so global.
Yeah.
And you think it's just going to be just your friends seeing it, but once it goes on to Disney Plus, the stories resonate throughout the world, and then you get contacted by people that your story's touched, and then you just become humble, just like, wow, like this person in France or this person like felt the way I did, and then you know the struggles that I went through as a parent, and that they went through it too, and maybe I can help them, you know, with some healing, and it's great. It's just when the other directors come up, they're going to have their own spotlight, and they're going to get their chance to talk about their message that they're trying to convey, and it's truly remarkable. Pixar's reach, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if you were to go back through the program, what would be the advice you'd give yourself?
Oh, mine would be like, be brave, make choices real fast. Like, because I think it's like you can question, and you can be, I happen to be hitting a dead horse for quite a while on like a third imaginary character, feeling like I needed to put something imaginary in there to make it merit animation. Mm-hmm. And when I let go of that, the film came together, you know, and I feel like that was, and I feel like it merits animation. Like it kind of, because we let go of that, we made something that you don't see very often in animation, which is like a sort of filmically conveyed story of two human characters, you know, that's like, we used all the tools in the toolbox to tell this story. And I just feel like being brave and making choices fast, because we'll make everybody just be able to move forward and add on faster. That's
awesome. I also want to add, like, I have helped directors make stories, you know, at Pixar. Like, we've all helped in our own ways to tell their stories, and then suddenly you're in a position to like, oh, you're the one answering the questions, you know, and now I got to know what kind of filmmaker I am and what kind of shots I want, and I would say just have confidence in yourself that you have some taste and you know what you want. You know, that was the hardest thing for me to learn, get used to, was just that feeling of like, to Edwin's imposter syndrome kind of thing. It's like, I don't belong here. Oh my God, I'm a faker. I'm totally faking it, you know, the kind of thing. And then as you go, you slowly go, no, I want it framed like a theater stage. And I don't want the camera to be doing this. I want it to be, you know, like, you just find your own sense of style, I guess, as a storyteller.
I mean, I think I should go on record to say that, like, Maddie, your day job at the time was lead story artist, and Bobby's, yours was story artist. Erica's was creative content director of all of these sort of docs we do in the background. Steve's was animator, and Edwin's was soup department tech director. So as you said, you were all in the sphere and in the the area of either very directly or indirectly of the films being made, but now you've been in the hot white center for a while, with everything pointed at you now, any more advice you would give to yourself or takeaways that you had from the experience?
I'd say trust yourself and your instincts. Because like, I remember at the beginning, I was always asking somebody else, what do you think? What do you think? Does this work? Does this work? And I remembered, like, I'm running out of time. I got to make my own choices. I got to stand up right now and be the director. And so, yeah, trust your instincts. Because there was actually one great idea that I was given by Mark Andrews, my story mentor. And he gave me this really great idea, but I was like, but that's not the story I'm trying to tell. And I like your story, but that's not my story. So trust your instincts, trust yourself.
Yeah, to build on that, I mean, this sounds almost like the flip side of that, but I think they're actually both in parallel, and that's really trusting your crew. I think I learned, especially, I'd been part of films before, but it wasn't until I was directing that I realized just how collaborative animation is. I think it's probably one of the most collaborative art forms out there. And so when I see the film, the things I'm most proud of, I can actually trace back not to necessarily ideas I came up with, but ideas that people in the crew came up with or contributed. And so when I look at the film and I look at each one of us, like, I just know it's not just us who really made the film. There's teams of people behind us who really made it all possible. And all of their contributions are what made the film so great. And, it's something I kind of knew and would say going into it, but until I was really given the role to actually perceive that across the board, it really...
I think that's a really profound one, because not until you've been, because you're associated with every shot. Like, you're always there. So the short or the film or the movie becomes a photo album of just memories, like of just who you went to school with, who you worked with every time a shot comes up. And I think one of the things that saddens me is that starts to fade a bit as your memory of things connects you. But for at least a year or two after you've made these things, you don't see them as a film. They're just photo albums, right?
Yeah,
completely.
Yeah, you remember the times you were sitting with your animators or your story person, or that collaboration is so, I remember sitting there and listening to the music for the first time. Yeah. So
that day we had Jeannie's dog come in and sit in dailies in the war room at the end.
Yeah.
That was
So
like,
jealous.
oh yeah, that's that shot. Oh yeah, it was so good.
I should have put a dog in
Oh,
my
I'm gonna
story.
cry now.
Going for out, I'm very proud that I was able to help out a little bit there. And my contribution is I modeled a pea stain. So that's my part.
Yes. So good.
That's a memorable moment.
Edwin.
Beautifully modeled.
Well, guys, it's been nothing but a pleasure to pick your brains and hear about your experiences, and I hope everybody at the Academy gets to enjoy your shorts as much as we all have and the rest of the world is right now. And thank you so much for your time. So
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Andrew.
Good
That
to see
was
you guys.
Everyone
so
was
much.
so nice.
Thank you guys.